Hey everyone, welcome you all to India HR Live, a TV channel for the HR professional. Oh, I like to call it that way because it's internet, but then again, I haven't seen any TV channel for the HR professionals very particularly. But then this is totally HR, organizational development, leadership, and everything under the earth of, talent. So again, we are so excited to bring such an excellent panelist to you, and we are going to talk about leveraging high potential employees for business. So it's not a, what would I say? It's not a jargon hypo. It is there, believe me, and you might have heard and you might have already implementing a lot of initiative at your organization, but yet some of the organizations are still feeling a little bit of reluctance to pinpoint and say high post or high potential employees, or probably engaging them or having a program is a total waste. So my target, or at India HR Live, our intention for this show is to let you all know, learn more about who all are hypers, how do we leverage them for business performance, and mainly how do we engage them, develop, train, engage, and then retain within your organization. So stay tuned. If you have any questions to our guest, follow the hashtag India HR Live on Twitter or on Facebook or everywhere, and post your questions. We would be so much happy to take your questions to our panelists. Stay tuned. Let me welcome our panelists. First of all, we have Dr. Suvedu Das. Hey, sir, welcome to the show.
Hi, Nisha. Good evening, and hi, everybody.
Well, thank you, and we are so excited and delighted to have you here with us today.
I'm here. I'm also excited.
Wonderful. And then we have Cynthia Johnson. She is a friend of mine. She is a managing director of NGDM Consultants LLC. She is right there, I think, 50 minutes drive from my home in Dallas. So, Cynthia, happy to have you here with us today.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited. This feels like being a celebrity. So thanks for the invite, Nisha. I appreciate it.
Wonderful to hear that. And a very lovely person I always call Robin Schooling. Robin is one of my favorite HR professionals over here. And she is a managing director, strategist, speaker, and human resource writer and blogger. And I would recommend everyone to follow her blog, hrschoolhouse.com. Robin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nisha. Hi, everybody. And I'm, of course, just across the border from the two of you in Louisiana. So we're sharing the same weather here today, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, totally. So, again, to note that Louisiana Shrimp Conference has been the first conference that I have ever attended, and I had the honor to be a part of social media team with the help of Robin Schooling. So thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. We loved having you.
All right, so let's meet Mankesh. Hey, Mankesh, welcome to the show.
Hi, Nita. Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to be in this show. So nice.
Great. Well, Mankesh is a professor in HRM and OB area and HR consultant. And so sorry not to keep his nameplate on because we have a little bit of a slow internet bandwidth. So heads up to that. Mankesh, welcome to the show once again.
Thank you very much. So nice of you.
And last but not least, we have Divya Jain, Assistant VP at Right Management, and wonderful person to connect with. Divya, welcome to the show.
Hi Nisha, hi everyone, and thanks for inviting me on the show. It's wonderful to be on this platform. It feels like, you are a high potential and that's spotlighted on top of you. And I'm really hoping that all the people listening to this have been high potentials themselves, are budding high potentials, and I hope we as a group are collectively able to help you, traverse your journey. So welcome, and let's have a good discussion.
Great.
Over to you,
Nisha. Great. Well, it's a great start, Divya. And as you said, for the organizations at this point, they have a little bit of a confusions in their mind, if you will, who are hypos? I mean, high potential employees. Let's start with that question. We have these high performers in our organization, but at the same time, people call hypos and initiatives are there for hypos. But what is exactly differentiate a high performer from a hypo? So let's start with that question. Dr. Des, would you like to take the turn? Hello? So, Dr. Das, can you hear us?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
Are you able to hear me?
great. Yeah, we are opening the panel discussions, and I thought, it would be great if we can start with the question or the notion of how do we differentiate high performers from hypos?
Yeah, if you see the real perception of the people who identify the high potentials, because we have seen it all depends on how you define a high potential. What are the definitions, what are the parameters to define a person, whether he's a high potential or not? And second thing, the perception of the person who defines or identifies. So there are varying perceptions. So according to me, a person who really delivers what the organization needs at the right time and to the desired level, overcoming all kinds of obstacles, carrying people together, and they have certain traits which differentiates them among the others, which make them high potential. That's my view.
Right. Cynthia, would you like to add on anything with that thought of Dr. Das?
I would like to add to that to me, a high potential is, I prefer the terminology pivotal talent, and I take more of a futuristic view. So it's not so much about just this moment in time, but I think a high potential or a pivotal talent is someone who pivots the business into the future. So, and there are a couple of qualities that I'd like to, and I call them an A player, right? So an A player, and there are 3 A's that I typically attach to a high potential or pivotal talent. One is their agility. They're able to demonstrate their adaptability in times of change. And as we know, organizations are going through so much change right now. So you want to have someone who has that ability to maneuver through all those changes. And then I'm looking for someone who has the ability not just on the technical side or job knowledge end, but also on emotional intelligence, the ability to build relationships, networks that are powerful in their day-to-day as well as in the future role. Most importantly, they have the competencies that the organization needs in the future state. And then finally, the aspiration, they have the strong passion and desire to excel, to do great things, and they have that connectedness to that organization. So those are my 3 A's: agility, ability, and aspiration.
Wonderful. Well, Robin, how do you want to differentiate high performers and then hypos?
I really like that definition with the 3 A's, and I think one of the things I've always considered a hallmark of someone with high potential is it is really that agility. I guess I see it as flexibility to some degree, where they are more than just a subject matter expert in their particular area, but they're very agile across the spectrum of the enterprise, spectrum of the organization, and they exhibit curiosity, they exhibit an interest in learning other things. So if I'm working in marketing, I'm not just going to stay within that sphere and focus just on my particular area. I'm going to be very curious and flexible across the organization. And I think another key attribute is someone who demonstrates sort of the characteristics of a high potential employee is someone who's very receptive to feedback. And part of that comes out of their ambition and their aspirations, as we mentioned before, but they seek out feedback. They want to hear the good, the bad, and then they latch on to that and use that to improve. And that's, not everybody has the ability or the willingness to hear constructive criticism, good, bad, and then act on it. I think that's a key differential for hypos.
Wonderful. Dr. Mankesh, would you like to add your thoughts on what do you
Yeah,
see the difference between high performers and hypers?
yeah. I say high potential employees are those employees to whom we consider to be future ready. And when we are considering somebody as a future ready, that is being observed from his current set of behaviors. Like in every organization, we have a set of competencies. We say this competency is for a particular level. When I talk about future, whatever task is going to do, is he able to display those competencies current level? So if I can map that, I say this guy is a high potential. And in that case, I would also like to add one more thing. A guy who will be called as a high potential employee is a guy, or a girl, he is or she is showing both the left brain and right brain agility. I mean, they are perfect or having a good, score on the left brain sensitivity as well as the right brain part of it. But then we say it's a hemisphere balance, and the person actually can have an emotional competency and technical competency. So we say, is the person is able to map with his behavior to a group, can handle that, as well as is he able to do the technical part of it. So that is making a person as a future ready. So I believe that is what is the definition of potential.
Wonderful. Well, in fact, Divya, at Right Management, you recently have this initiative. Recently, this initiative has been going on, like Hypo Week, and it's been getting a lot of traction nowadays. And that's how Right Management came upon my radar. And I thought, if you're discussing this topic, we should definitely bring someone on from Right Management. And glad we got Divya Chin right now. So it would be great if you can share some of the insights that you get from thoughtful leaders that have been shared by them. What do you think the difference between hypos and hypers?
Right. So, since you already mentioned about the hypo week that Right Management just ran, so going with the same philosophy on which we premise our hypo, and I think Dr. Das and Sandhya, Robin, and Mangesh, they've all said most important elements of defining a hypo as a philosophy that Right Management goes, and what I personally feel and advise my clients is tie it all together. So I think performance is an inherent part of a person's potential. It is the consistency of that performance over years that actually translates into one's potential as organization sees it. So as Dr. Mangesh said, that the past performance or the past, whatever he has been doing in the organization is one element that needs to be considered when I define a high potential, coupled with what I think Sandhya has beautifully mentioned, the 3 A's model, which is agility, ability, and aspiration. What we define aspiration is something which needs to come out in the confidence that organization plays in you as a leader. So that the confidence organization has in your leadership qualities is something that can be translated into aspiration. That is another element. And the third element, the most important element of it is what the inherent potential you have, which is in effect translated by the competencies or the behaviors that you display. And that is the potential assessment that you do to understand that whether the high potential has all the 3 elements put together, and then you define that how you can leverage that person's potential to drive further performance in the organization. So that's what I have to add on this question.
Wonderful. So a great segue to what you have added right now is, what organizations can do in order to define the hypo initiatives well in the very beginning, so that it can tie to your succession planning initiative. So your employees know, yes, I'm a hypo, but then what is organization expecting from them? So what do you think are some of the key aspects that organizations should do in order to communicate what is a hypo initiative and how do we identify them? And I want to know, I mean, if you, it would be great if you can tell a little bit more about, how do you think organizations should communicate this initiative while they implement their succession planning process?
Yeah, Nisha, can I say?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, to identify the hypos, I feel we should look at two category of competences. One is the business related competences, and second is the people related competences. And in the business related competences, a guy who has a strategic thinking ability, who has a excellence in execution, and has tremendous initiative and drive, keeping the future in view. That's what I can say. Those are the business related competencies. And coming to the people related competencies, it is the people leadership that is managing the juniors and the teams and the peers, and how they are good at influencing others, including the stakeholders, the customers, the government, and the people around who really matter for the business. And also, they are very good at customer orientation, both internal as well as external. So, going by these parameters, we in our organization have a mechanism through which we identify such people who are good at this. In this, we take up the past performance records to the performance management system. We expose some people through the assessment development centers, also through different psychometric tests, and then we identify them, put them on different positions which are quite challenging, and people who are high post and who are looking for the future leadership positions, they also love to have challenges. And those guys who really enjoy challenges and overcome obstacles, that way we put them on rotation with job enlargement and job enrichments. So like that we identify and chalk out a proper career path for them, so that they are the future leaders who can achieve what the business desires.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I
And I
also would
think
like to
one
add to
of
Dr. Das. What I think, yeah, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
What I think, yeah, what I think the high posts they can really be identified through ADC process, Assessment and Development Center, that makes a person to be evaluated by a group, and thus a cross examination, the cross evaluation happens. That's why exactly the potential can be identified. And what I believe is that a potential needs a platform to perform. Let's say once you identify that potential, then you can actually have to work on to give him a platform. And once he gets the platform, he would like to perform on that. And that platform, one of the aspect is we talk whatever the other way is that, or the management initiatives, HR initiatives, so that the person can go ahead in this path.
Right.
I think one of the other aspects of this is making sure that organizational culture supports the identification of hypos and the ability to move them around, because uh, that needs to infiltrate not just from, let's say, the C-suite or the HR department or be laid out as a program, but it really needs to be embedded in the culture, in the DNA of the organization. And the responsibility for allowing those typos to reach out to have job enrichment activities, trying new things, to collaborate across the organization. The responsibility for that rests so strongly with individual managers. So if I'm the individual manager of a hypo, I need to enable them, I need to create the culture within my department, I need to make sure that they're given those opportunities, because I've seen it derail where someone has been identified, they're sort of on this track, they're aware that they're identified as a hypo, and then their manager, sadly, keeps them from doing that, and it sort of is to the detriment then of the entire organization. So the role of that individual manager in conjunction with the organizational culture, I think, is critical.
And if I may add to that, Robin, I like your thought about culture. I think the thought that comes to my mind is having the executive mindset and commitment towards development. It's interesting because I find that organizations put a lot of focus on customer acquisition, customer retention. There's also a strong focus on product and services through R&D and operations. But when it comes to human capital, a lot of times there's a lot of lip service. We don't see the same level of investment in talent and in talent development and in talent acquisition and talent development. We do a great job in acquiring the talent many times, and then we're very interested when they're leaving the organization. But somewhere in between, we don't do a very constructive job in identifying who are the top achievers and who has the potential. And even if we do, we use very subjective criteria. So going back to the point that Dr. Mangesh and Dr. Das mentioned, there needs to be a more metric-driven tool to diagnose who are the high pose and who are the future talent and future leaders in the organization. So in other words, I think commitment of the executives is key. And then translating that commitment into metrics-driven assessment tools to identify your high potential is crucial. And then building in on Robin's point and creating that holistic culture where now the talent can not just be identified but also be developed. Don't just care about your high potentials when you're attracting them and then when they're leaving the organization. Care about them throughout their life cycle within the organization.
Well, I have a follow-up with that thought that Cynthia has shared right now about the assessment tool. So do you suggest any particular tools that you see your clients are using right now, or do you advise any assessment tools that has to be tied to their performance management system or their succession plan strategy or whatever, these two arenas? Do you suggest any assessment tool that it would be, if you can share it, would be very helpful for our audience?
Okay. I don't think it's just one. There's one right answer because there's different sizes, and there's no one-size-fits-all response to that. I've seen organizations use a varied toolkit. And it starts with certainly the performance in their job. I think it was Divya who mentioned earlier that it's their current performance. So you want to be able to objectively, through talent calibration, identify who are the people who are stellar performance in their current job and having that headroom to do more. So it starts there. So having a good performance tool helps. Secondly, I think there is also assessment centers, and I think Dr. Mangesh may have mentioned this. Assessment centers where organizations can take more of a talent pool approach, where you take all of your high performers and allow them to go through an assessment center where you put them through various instruments, which includes everything from the ability to creatively think through issues, to problem solve, how they work within a group environment, etc. So you can put them through a little bit of maybe it's a half a day or a full day type assessment center. And they come out of that, and then you find out also through, and I think peer feedback as well as all of the key relationship alliances that they've built, getting feedback from them is important. So I've seen organizations use some semblance of a 360 tool to also substantiate the fact that they're not just managing up appropriately, but they're managing sideways as well as below them as well, so that it's a person that you develop who has a balanced view. So I think my recommendation is not one answer, but look at what your organization has an appetite for and build in or fold in those methodologies that work best for you.
Right. Then would you like to add any particular thought regarding, the assessment tools, and then, go ahead.
Yeah, before actually assessment tools, Nisha, I would go back to your previous question, which is on the identification of high pose. Before organization even get into identifying who's my high potential, what organization first need to define is what I want from a high potential program. Is it actually succession planning that I'm trying to map with my high potential, or is it something more? Because if it's succession planning, then my high potential change. The audience set is different. But if it is more than just succession planning, then my different set of high potentials can be identified across organizations. So that definition is the crux. After organization decide and define what they want from their high potentials, because high potential exists across organization at all levels. What you need from one level may differ from second level vastly. And that is how your high potential program will also be different at different levels depending on the need of organization. So the core that I want to believe, and I take it to organization, that organization, yes, they want to invest in people, but they want to invest in people to improvise organization performance at large. So there has to be a very strong alignment between people's aspiration and high potential development, focus on the people development as well as organization, what they get at the end of the day. So there has to be a marriage of the two, and hence the identification parameters can be defined. And then what Sandhya had just mentioned, that there could be multiple tools and techniques through which my high potentials can be identified. And further, they can be put through various different development interventions depending on the need of what I am going to do with that set of high potential. So that is very important. And similarly, this will answer your question of communicating to hypers. It's a very sensitive issue. As you can imagine, organizations are facing it, whether to tell them or not to tell them, whether to tell it aloud or to just tell them and keep them in one bucket.
Correct.
So I believe it's very important to tell them. If you don't tell them, somebody else will tell them, and they will go and join that somebody else. So it's very important to let the high potential know that yes, we identify you as a high potential formally, and yes, we want to take care of you so that you survive and you grow in the system. At the same time, the organization grows with you. So that should be the approach organization should take in terms of notifying.
Correct. Well, this is indeed a great thought that Divya has shared right now. Well, in fact, communicating hypos is really a sensitive issue, as she said. Well, before we have this hypo initiative in an organization, we always know when that performance appraisal comes, high competency or high performers, as I can say, will always be the high performers with the 5 rating, and the poor performers would always be the poor performers. So this sort of myth, or what would I say, that assumption is already there within the organization. So when you highlight a particular group of people and saying these are hypers, what are some of the complications that you might face in your organization, and how do you sort of balance that? Yes, we have hypos, but at the same time, we have these employees who are highly loyal at your organization, but they are a little bit into a poor performance category due to various, lack of motivation or some of the other factors. So how do you sort of balance these people and then engage them or motivate them? Yes, they have a place within the organization, and we are really taking care of you. So have you heard of such situations? Divya, I'm asking this question particularly to you, and after
Right.
that, I would love to
Absolutely.
hear some of the perspective from our other panelists.
Yeah. So to answer that question, Nisha, this is a very likely situation to be in, because at the end of the day, the high potential are only handful in an organization. The moment you identify them, the others start feeling that okay, we have not been identified. So what do we do? So it's very important for organizations, yes, to engage them, to retain them, because their motivation level could go down. One of the better ways of doing it is to define individual development plans for everybody in the organization. Help them understand what is it that's stopping them from being a high potential. Coach them, guide them, put them through those programs which can help them to develop those competencies. In a very constructive way, this needs to be done. At the same time, high potentials also need to understand and need to be managed in terms of their expectation. So they are high potential, yes, they've been identified, yes, but that it doesn't just end there. Their responsibility begin there. How do they then consistently perform better, consistently show that they have something? So the expectations need to be set with high potential so that it's not just a reward and recognition kind of a thing, but it with much bigger responsibility, much bigger role comes much bigger responsibilities on your head. That is something you need to manage high potentials and brand them, that everybody can become a high potential if given the right path and right support from the organization.
Right. Mankesh, you would like to?
Yeah, what I'd like to say is that when a person is being identified to be as a hypot and we are communicating the person, it sometimes so happens if at a particular level, the kind of opportunity we can provide to the hypots, and if the number of hypots who have been identified more than the kind of opportunities we provide them, then it becomes very difficult to adjust them or to manage the platform. Second, sometimes in organization there are some employees who are very loyal or may not be very hypot, if we do some activity or some situation or some intervention in which they will become dissatisfied, then what happens, even the ecosystem will be disturbed, or maybe the system under which the social system under which the organism is operating, that might get disturbed, and in which even the high court, when they wanted, yes, we should do, becomes a major responsibility of whole the vertical, maybe along with the support of the HR, then to platform in which there will be a balance, and that balance will give a momentum to the high courts to actually contribute for the betterment of the organization.
Right. Well, in fact, talking about, we wanted to get a little more focus on whether we need to tell them or not to tell them, because this is really sensitive, as we are saying. Robin, did you have any sort of experience while you are working with your clients dealing with the communication program of hypers, whether we need to tell these employees, shout it loud, or keep it private? What do you think?
Well, you know what I think is interesting is when we look at large organizations versus small organizations. Because small or medium-sized companies that are lucky if they have even given a thought to succession planning for one thing, let alone identifying typos. But I think they do it perhaps not as formally, but to some degree in their mind. And so leaders may have an idea that Joe is in line and we're going to develop him. He's a high potential employee, but it may not necessarily be as formal. I guess I've seen it work and I've seen it not work. I think there are some problems that can arise if you publicly announce here's sort of our high potential group, or you tell individual employees that they are considered a high potential employee, and you run a couple of risks. And I don't necessarily know the answer to this. I'm interested to hear what everybody else has to say. If you tell an employee that they've been identified, they're a high potential employee, we're going to set you up, to do some new assignments. They're going to rotate you across the organization, and they may get in their mind a time frame that is unrealistic. And so when promotions or transfers or more money or different titles don't come, you run the risk of them becoming dissatisfied. I guess the question, I'm looking for some information, really. I guess everybody's ideas on that is how do you handle that? And I think another issue that may arise, if you identify someone as a high potential, and then they don't live up to those expectations, how do you remove them from the list? Because of the list. I've seen that play out as well, where someone is on track and they're not quite fulfilling the expectations, and all of a sudden they're no longer considered a hypo. What do you do then? What are some things that people have run into? I'm interested in hearing.
That is an interesting question, and I'm so eager to hear some of the experience. If you have gone through this sort of experience, how do we, remove one person from the list? List is always the list because we have already communicated everywhere. And then when we are taking somebody down from that list, how do we go about it? Cynthia, would you like to add anything?
I think many of us have talked about setting expectations. I think that was something that every one of the speakers here have talked about. So I think that is number one, and that is key, right? Right up front, saying it doesn't mean once a hypo, always a hypo. All right, that is number one, and that clarity needs to come out clear whenever the leadership or the immediate manager is having a discussion about the high potential. I mean, think about it from a business sense. When you have a customer and the customer adds a lot of value in a given year or the following year, they're not always your primary customer going forward, right? Things may change with the business. Things may change at their end. Their needs may be different, and they may stop becoming that primary or the high-profile customer at one point. So the same goes with, I think, high potentials as well. And be clear, be transparent. If they have fallen short, I think the appropriate action would be to explain why. To say, well, and be specific when you give that feedback. And I think here you have the crucial personal management skills 101, wherein the leader has to be clear as to what were those competencies that the individual fell short of, provide some specific examples of what that looked like, and what the person needs to do in order to get back to that state of being considered to be a high potential.
Right.
I have a point here. When you try to communicate a person that he is high potential or not, in case of high potentials, another challenges immediately comes up that they have high expectations. And if those expectations are not met, then the person is likely to move out of the organization. And any amount of investment in that person also becomes a problem, because the organization needs to tap their energy, tap the investment, and provide the right opportunities. So that's why what we have been doing in our group is we are developing a pool of talent who are hypos, and we are moving across the group companies. And if they feel that they are not having adequate opportunity to grow and perform, then we give them challenging assignments in greenfield projects. That's the way we manage their expectations, as well as the people who are not that hypos. We also have carved out a proper career paths for them. The people who are hypos, who can take up generalist position. So what we have divided it into two categories. One are the generalists and one are the specialists. If some people are not good in general management or in strategic management or in overall business management, then they like to grow and remain in the comfort zone of being a specialist. So that way we also manage their expectations, that let some people who are not that good, let them develop themselves to be a specialist, whereas the hypos who have tremendous scope, tremendous potential, tremendous ambition, tremendous passion, and the capability to deliver, so let them go as journalists and take up the leadership positions of CEOs or CEOs or CHOs, whatever term with them.
Right. That is such a great example that you have added, Dr. Das. Well, in fact, to follow for that particular question, what do you see are some of the complications or some of the challenges when you have these hypo employees that are being given highly powered positions, and then you find out that they have been moved to this particular position without enough transition support? So in that aspect, how do you kind of see the challenges, and then knowing that these hypo employees are going to be a failure without this enough transition support? So do you have a pathway to provide, we call it as 30, 60, 90 days, right? So do you have a pathway to provide this career support for these hypo employees?
True. You see, in a typical Indian organization, there is a normal resistance to accept outsiders. And I myself is an example. When I took over as the head of HR of this organization, people who were there in the HR team earlier and aspiring to occupy this position, I myself found a lot of resistance in terms of acceptability. But I had to carve my way through, mingle with people, understand the pulse, and also carry the people and communicate with them as a HR buddy. So you have to carry the people and you have to make yourself feel that you are one of them. So that's why I like Nisha's term, your HR buddy.
Oh,
So
thank
that's the very thing which really attracted me, and that's the way I really paved my way through the organization. And now I can proudly claim that I'm having tremendous control over the entire HR fraternity. So one has to really face the challenge, and that's where people management skills, apart from any amount of technical competence, strategic competence, financial competence, whatever you term them, it is basically ultimately boils down to the people management skill. And there, the hypos, either they make a career or they mar their career. So that's very important, according to me.
Right,
People
right,
management skill.
right. Well, yeah. Let's move on to the questions from our Twitter stream. Would you like to add any other follow-up or thoughts to what Dr. Das has mentioned? If not, we can take a few questions from our Twitter stream.
Yeah, Nisha, just before you move on to the question, there's just one thought I want to add to
Mhm.
what Dr. Das has said. I think he's very beautifully mentioned that one has to prove himself. By defining that or identifying somebody as a high potential is no promise that he is getting a promotion. That should not be the expectation. The expectation is that organization sees a potential in you. We are giving you opportunity to develop that potential by putting you through various programs like rotations, giving them special assignments, projects to test whether that potential can be manifested. Once that has been done, I think Sandhya mentioned some time back that there has to be a matrix driven system. That matrix actually help us identify whether that potential has been tapped or not, and then only any promotion decision should be taken. There, that is the way where we can actually do an error correction at source by not hastily moving a person into a new role before first confirming they can handle that larger responsibility, larger roles. So give them a snapshot, let them prove themselves because they have potential, they will definitely do that, they have the drive. Once they do it, retest them again and then take a decision. And I think what you said, the transition is definitely needed. This is a way the transition can be smoothened out. So that's just one thought I wanted to add on.
Wonderful. Well, in fact, we have a question related to that from Nupur Pathak. She's asking, what is the identification of hypos goes wrong? How do we do damage control? So, this is in fact what Divya has mentioned right now. That is a great segue to her question. Would anybody want to answer that question?
Can you please repeat the question?
Her question was, what if the identification of hypo goes wrong? How do we do damage control? I mean, if we have found out that we have selected the wrong person as a hypo, like in fact, we have mentioned this differentiation of high performers and then hypos, and turns out that he's not a hypo. So how do we kind of rectify those issues?
Exactly, we have faced the same situation in our company.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes back we identified some hypos, we exposed them to executive enrichment program in the IMs, and we also exposed them to different business leadership programs. So these people were picked up by the bosses and through a certain mechanism. But when they were exposed to those programs and when we took feedback from the concerned institutes of IIMs and other people, so we found that they really did not have those traits of being a hypos. So gradually when we asked them that are you willing to move out of this particular position and take up some challenging assignments anywhere else in the group, they refused. And that's how they are really exposed that they are not that hypos. So that's why at the beginning, if you recollect, I raised the issue as to how a person perceives the other person to be hypotential. Even the people who assess or who identify personal hypos, are they really themselves clear as to how to identify an hypo? So these are also some issues where identification of a hypos also, that also is a question at times.
Can I just build on that? I think that what you're saying, Doctor, is very, very good. But one of the things that we have to do is, in terms of damage control, is don't wait to act on the situation. I think one of the things errors that we make is that we sit on the information, or we have some concerns, we don't voice those concerns. I think as leaders or managers, we need to make sure that if there are those issues, that we are addressing them in a timely manner. And then most importantly, that as people advocates or talent advocates, we are learning from these experiences, which means that to Dr. Das's point, going back and understanding what exactly went wrong here. Was it the assessment piece? Was it the fact that the individual did not have the aspiration and we forced something because we thought that that was the right thing for the business to do? What was it that went wrong? Learn from it and make sure that you adjust your assessment tools, your people leadership skills, your mentoring programs, your development programs to ensure the same situation does not happen again. To me, that is true damage control, ensuring that long term, that issue has now been corrected and compressed so it doesn't happen again.
Wonderful. Well, in fact, related to that, we have two particular comments. One is on our Facebook page. Satya Prakash Das, he is saying, it is always true that hypos are high performers. That is one notion. And the other one is from Anish Aravind on Twitter. He is saying, wonder why would organization need hypo program as against having better performance measurement for all employees? So if this sort of question, if an employee is asking this particular question, how do you want it to answer? Robin, would you like to take that question?
Well, I think that comes back to what we said very early on in this discussion. When you think of one of the reasons or one of the characteristics of a hypo is that they are future focused, and they're future focused in alignment with the future focus and the goals of the organization. And so when an employee asks why do we have a hypo program, what's the point of it, why do you identify certain individuals, I think part of that message, part of that explanation becomes it's future focused on the sustainability of the organization, the sustainability of a particular department, functions, whatever it may be. And that brings me back to laying the cultural framework in the organization. What is the culture focused on? What does it support? And is it also forward thinking? I've worked for and with organizations that that are not future focused, that live in the moment or live in the operational year. And those are the types of organizations that don't and can't support a hypo program or mentality, let alone they not think of anything along the lines of succession planning. So I think having that internal explanation, that internal understanding of why you have a hypo program in the first place is really where you need to start to be able to then communicate it to employees. Yes. It also, of course, becomes a attraction and recruitment tool for your organization if you can be open and transparent about it. And so when you bring people into the organization before they're even employed with you, you can kind of discuss those opportunities and those career paths and those development tools that you have in place. And that can be a plus. And I think it comes back to being open, transparent, but yet understanding the reasons yourself of why you have it.
Wonderful. So my next question is to Mangesh. Well, this is from Satya. He is asking how to convert a common employee to a hypo. Do you think educational qualifications and experience are also the parameters to identify hypos?
I'd like to add here something like that. To convert a common person into a hypo, there is a belief that if a person doesn't get converted, mostly the senior officials or the management, they go into something called as a constancy syndrome. For a long time, they do not believe this person can actually do a better job or he can contribute to betterment of the organization. Second, when we identify somebody as a hypo, we talk about this person is having an ability to leverage the business. When we talk about leverage, we understand whatever effort he gives, the output comes much bigger way. That's why when a person needs to be converted or the person needs to be matured to this concept of hypo, there is one thing, yes, he has to go through a series of interventions. There has to be learning interventions. He should be given opportunity to work. For hypos, mostly it so happens the performance becomes the biggest motivator. The job becomes the motivator for them, and that's why they have to be given challenging assignments so that they understand. Okay, they are having a potential which is worth for the organization, and there has to be periodic feedback. And when the feedback is being given, the feedback is not only to talk about the level of competency of that individual, rather also how he can contribute to the betterment of the organization so that he understands, as before sometimes Dr. Das was telling, sometimes we wrongly identify an hypo, then what is the mechanism we go ahead with that. So what is to be done when we are communicating to a hypo that you are a hypo, also the kind of sets of expectations the organization gives from him or what kind of opportunity the organization can provide, that also is to be communicated. I think that is how is some of the mechanism by which a person can be made into a hypo or he can be considered into.
Right. Well, in fact, I would like to add one of my personal take on, I mean, question on. We always say that let's start from the beginning very correctly. And in fact, when we talk about potential, do you think that our talent acquisition team should be very cautious about hiring people or hiring for potential? So what do you think? What's your take on, okay, start from the beginning, perfectly all right, hire for culture fit, we always say that. So how about, not looking at the competencies very particularly, but about the potential, about the passion, about the eagerness to grow and develop within the organization. So to that thought, what do you wanted to add? Cynthia,
To me?
Cynthia,
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, should I go?
Yeah, go
My
ahead.
thought there, Nisha, is that in terms of talent acquisition, very, very crucial, because I think the question that the talent acquisition expert should be asking the hiring manager is, so what do you see for this role in downline, not just immediate, the 0 to 1 year. So what do you see for this role specifically, not the person, but the role down the line? Is this a person is this role going to be a succession role? Is this role crucial for the well-being or the performance of the business? Now, these kind of hard questions that are posed during the intake meeting with the hiring manager will help the talent acquisition people identify if you're looking for individuals with potential, because it's not bad to hire full potential, right? There may be certain roles where full potential is fine, is just fine. But there are certain leadership roles and critical roles for the business where you do want to hire individuals with the potential to grow with the organization or grow into lateral or even to the position that the hiring manager has today. So I think that's a critical question that talent acquisition should be asking at the point of or prior to looking at candidate pools.
Right. Well, Dr. Daz, would you like to add?
Yes, I want to add the question which that Satya had asked, how to convert a non-hypo to an hypo. You see, there are many people who are just on the borderline. I mean, you cannot reject them. They have tremendous potential. Maybe a little bit of polishing or refinement will bring them to the hypo category, or something that is inhibiting them. If that fear factor, that lead is removed, they can become very good leaders and high-performing individuals. So these are some of the things which can be tried, like coaching, mentoring, counseling, or being a constant guide or buddy, so that the fear factor, which really limits their potential, if that lead can be removed. I've seen many people, I've experimented myself with many people as a coach and mentor, and I have seen they have really come out of their shell and they have worked wonders. So it is, and also at the same time, the person who feels that he's a non-hypo, I mean, that attitude or that mindset needs to be changed, and that person must be willing to change himself or herself. Otherwise, no amount of coaching, mentoring, guiding, polishing, training, nothing will work unless that individual has tremendous desire to learn, to grow, and to perform and to achieve success.
Right.
Because success is one of the, it's like opium. Once you have tasted success, then you get addicted to that.
That's true. Well, in fact, going back to, how do we identify that candidate has got the potential to become a hypo? We always say that to identify a culture fit or not, go with behavioral interview questions. So again, at this point, our intention is to let our audience know how to start right in the beginning, right? So the question from our Twitter stream, Nubur Padak, she's rightly pointed out a segue to this particular thought. Is it possible to judge the potential at the time of hiring? And if so, what are some tools that you would suggest, just like behavioral interview questioning or something like that? Would you suggest any particular tool? Who would you like to take that question?
I'll take it.
Great, go ahead.
Okay. So, Nisha, as you have rightly mentioned, that behavioral event interviewing or competency-based interviewing is one tool, which is very effective to understand whether a person has the potential when you are trying to hire that person. What you need to do beforehand is actually set that expectation very right. So you know what competencies you're looking at, but you need to define at what level you want those proficiency. So proficiency of those competencies, and then you assess that person whether he is fitting that assessment on the proficiency level or not. Then the one way is to, if that person shows potential, the assessment will definitely show that. The other way of doing it, so you need to understand how you conduct a CBI very rightly and identify that data point. The other way is to understand is use those psychometric tools, which helps you understand an inherent potential that a person brings. So tools like Hogan, Berkman, these are the tools which gives you a good understanding of a person's potential on various competencies. Now these competencies could be generic because these tools are standard validated tools, not mapped to the competencies of organization. What you need to do as a process owner, as a talent acquisition team, or as the HR team of an organization is map these competencies back to what they mean in your context. That mapping is very important to understand that you are actually trying to judge the right potential that you want for your organization, or you're trying to just see whether he has any potential which could be good for the world, may not be for the organization. So yes, you should use psychometrics, but yes, you need to first define what those psychometrics give you in your context, and then use them. And then CBI or BEI is one of the better ways. The other way of doing a hiring, and this may be applicable at a level and above, is to do an assessment center at the time of hiring itself. This gives you a holistic understanding, identifying a person's performance, potential, at the same time competency-based behaviors and everything. But those are the tools which you need to use very cautiously and cannot be rolled out for everyone and across levels that you're hiring. So you need to define very well where the organization is willing to invest in terms of money, time, and efforts, and then go ahead and use these tools.
Wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful insights.
to
Can I
add
just
what
add?
Divya said, can I say?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Dr. Das.
to add what Divya has said, if you are looking for somebody in the senior position or in the middle management, one can always take a feedback from the bosses with which this guy has worked in the previous organization. So that also will give a lot of input both towards the positive attributes as well as the areas where he or she might have needed a lot of developmental aspects also. So that also acts as a very valid input for taking a call.
Right, right. Robin, you were saying something. Would you like to?
Yeah, I think another thing to consider, another thing that we need to keep in mind, because we've really been focusing on the acquisition of new talent. Of we're hiring someone new into the organization, and how we can successfully assess their potential before we onboard them into the organization in the first place. I think it's also critical to keep in mind that process for assessing if someone is a high pro can change at any time. So we may have an employee who's been with us for a year or two or five, and as they've grown in their career and the experience. They've perhaps had some training. They've had some deliverables. They've made progress in their career. Perhaps they've had a mentor or a skip-level manager who's worked with them. That employee who may be tenured with the organization already may now be identified as a hypo. When you brought them into the organization, perhaps we didn't see those capabilities, but now we see that potential. So it's not just new people coming into the organization, it's existing employees and never losing sight of that fact as well.
Wonderful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a fantastic conversation right now, and then with this amazing panelists like you all, we can have this conversation keep on going like as much as time we have. But unfortunately, we have only 60 minutes at this point, so we are about to we are about to wrap up the show right now. So finally, I would like to take one simple question to everyone. What is your one single tip that you wanted to tell our audience to engage the hypers? Just make it short. All right. So
I would say the hypos should manage their people excellently. That will deliver all other things.
right. And Cynthia.
I just want to say human capital matters, and job-focused, information-rich networks will provide the development your high potentials need.
Right. Robin?
I say empower them to be partners in their own career development plan.
Excellent. Mankesh?
Give them opportunities and mentor them continuously. I think that is going to be the key.
Right. And Divya?
Yeah, I would say show them the destination, show them the path, but let them walk the path themselves. Provide the support, but don't actually build the car for them to walk that path.
Those are wonderful insights, everyone. So I hope this 1 hour of conversation was very meaningful and helpful to you all. And thank you so much for all of the support that you have been doing on Twitter stream and all other social media platforms. Without your support, we couldn't do the show, and we are really honored and glad to have your support. And to our panelists, finally, thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your thoughts and insights. And it's really helpful to our audience, and we look forward to having you once again soon.
Thank you, Nisha. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha. It was a great pleasure interacting with all of you.
And the pleasure was ours too.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, so wish you all
Bye,
a
Divya. Bye,
wonderful rest
Cynthia.
of the
Bye,
day.
Robin.
Great. So if you haven't subscribed to our India HR Live YouTube channel, please go ahead. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.